Blinkist is the app that helps you become a more well-rounded person by letting you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try it for free and get 25% off a subscription by going to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I do need to start today with an apology for everything I've ever said on the show that has upset somebody. No, I'm kidding. I want to apologize because I did a little bit of a cleaning in the studio. You could call it sort of a bleaching of sorts. And I didn't realize that two furniture elements that are normally separated, where my microphone is connected to something that is nowhere near me, just so I can't inadvertently create any gonks in the audio. Two elements were touching that should not have been touching the last 2 days, and I didn't even realize that I was regularly creating a sort of a noise with the microphone. People sent me, as you can imagine, extremely polite messages about it, and I've resolved it. Okay, I've resolved it. So I do want to apologize for that, but let's not dwell on the negative. We are really starting to get to the next phase, which I would believe to be the end phase of the coronavirus pandemic, as cases are now down nearly 90% in the United States. Deaths are down nearly 85%. But vaccination continues to slow down, as there are now way more vaccines in the US than the number of people that seem to want them, at least relatively quickly, which is sad. And we're going to talk about that. Much of that lack of demand is because of Republicans. This isn't a bipartisan thing. 4% of Democrats don't want the vaccine. 41% of Republicans don't want the vaccine, as we discussed yesterday. Let's go through the case and death numbers as we now have them. Cases in the United States peaking in mid-January around 255,000 a day. Now down to an average of 32,000 a day. That is a decline of about 87% from that pandemic peak. There are some states where cases they're not literally zero, but they are almost statistically zero. Places like California that now have really, really low rates, and they're continuing down as more and more people get vaccinated. In terms of deaths, things are not yet looking as good. Deaths lag changes in cases by about 3 to 4 weeks, but nevertheless, deaths are now down about 82% from a pandemic peak in late January. We were at 3,450 a day. That's like 9/11 plus 10% every day in deaths in late January. We are now down to just a hair over 600 deaths a day. Still way too high to be calling this anything close to over, but the right direction continues. And that direction is down. Now, one factor that is slowing down the decline is that fewer and fewer people are getting vaccinated each day. This is not because there aren't enough vaccines or not enough appointments. Just about every state, many pharmacy chains, many locations have switched to just show up. No appointment needed. Just get over here and we'll give you a vaccine. We have more than enough vaccines to go around. We have vaccines here like countries around the world are dreaming of having. That's not an exaggeration. But 41% of Republicans and 24% of all Americans don't want the vaccine. And so after peaking at about 3.3 million doses per day in early April, we have seen almost a 50% decline to now just 1.8 million doses per day. This is embarrassing. Look around the world. Countries around the world are doing everything they can to get vaccines. There are countries that are happy to get 500,000 vaccines. We have millions and millions of them just sitting around ready. And we have millions and millions of people saying, nah, I don't want to get one. The cases and the deaths would decline way more quickly if more people got vaccinated. Just think, we're vaccinating about half of the number we were vaccinating a month ago each day. We could be seeing cases decline significantly faster if we just got back to where we were, 3.3 million vaccines per day. We could open everything sooner and more safely if more people got vaccinated. Now, what's going on globally? Because the U.S. led from the standpoint of bad early in the pandemic, we are now leading from the standpoint of good in terms of the vaccination. But the U.S. is not the world. What's going on with global numbers? The Good news is that global cases and global deaths are now clearly starting to come down. 10 days ago, it looked like, okay, they were leveling off, but where will things go? Globally, cases peaked at about 830,000 cases per day in later April. We're now down to about 665,000 a day. It's an outrageous number, but it's down 20% from the peak. That's good. Global deaths, similarly to the picture in the US, global deaths are declining, but lagging the case decline. Global deaths peaked at about 14,000 a day back in January. Can you imagine? Almost got back there in April, and we are now down to about 12,000 deaths a day. That's a decline of 15% from the peak, but there is a long way to go globally. And part of why it's so depressing to know that we have the vaccines for everyone, but to see in the United States people opting out, is that the vaccines are why the US is doing better and better. This is a very similar thing to the measles anti-vaxxers, and it's depressing doesn't even really cut it. You have measles anti-vaxxers who say, who dies of measles? Why would I go and get my kid vaccinated for measles? The reason almost no one dies of measles is the vaccination campaign has been so effective and the vaccine is so effective. Were it not for that, then people would be dying of measles. People are saying some cases are going down. This is ending. I don't need to get the vaccine. But the reason why they're going down is we have so many vaccines. It's a privilege to have access to so many vaccines. An incredible headline. Multiple states reported 0 COVID deaths on single days over the last week for the first time in months. This includes Arizona, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Maryland, and others. Now, of course, weekend reporting can throw off the meaning of any single day's data, but the averages are declining, things are opening, and that is all great. Just go and get vaccinated. It's free. You just show up. There's a vaccine available. And maybe this will be more of an incentive for people to get vaccinated, although I think the people not getting vaccinated don't care about this. The European Union has announced hours ago they will be opening to vaccinated Americans. Let's talk about that next. This is a very personal story for me. I'm kind of kidding, but people know I'm supposed to go to a wedding in Italy in early September. And I've been wondering, will Americans be allowed in? The Washington Post is now reporting that the European Union will be reopening their borders to the vaccinated American population very, very soon. The European Union announced this morning that they will be opening the borders to vaccinated Americans after more than a year during which travel has been significantly restricted. This is a Washington Post report, which says the decision will throw open Europe's doors to tourist, business, and other travel after a long stretch in which most of those from outside the 27-nation bloc have not been allowed in. It will hearten those. I am feeling heartened. I admit it. It will hearten those who have missed wandering the continent's ancient streets, as well as Europeans whose livelihoods depends on tourist cash. One final round of approvals is necessary in the coming days, but the sign-off is no longer in doubt. The plan was agreed upon by ambassadors today. The timing of when borders will actually open is not yet clear, but it could be within days and certainly by the end of June. The European Council, quote, now recommends that member states ease restrictions, in particular for those with an EU authorized vaccine. That would mean all of the vaccines authorized in the US would get the green light, but vaccines currently manufactured in Russia and China, that's the Sputnik and the Sinovac vaccine, would not, at least at this time, qualify you for entry to the European Union. This guidance from the European Union is not binding, meaning a country could say, we're not letting anybody in, or a country could say, we'll let people in with the Sputnik vaccine or the Sinovac vaccine or the bleach injections or whatever they want to do. But this is the guidance from the European Union. It has been a massive struggle in Europe. Greece opened relatively early. Croatia is open. Estonia. There are listen, if the truth is, if you're determined to go somewhere, you can almost certainly go. And I know, 10, 15 people who have done it. I have friends who wanted to go visit family in France. France was allowing people coming from the UK. The UK was allowing Americans with a 14-day quarantine. So they went to the UK, hung out 14 days, worked remotely, then went to France. Like you could do it all along, but that's not going to get the tourism industry restarted. So we are seeing a definite change at this point in time. Now, you will have a situation where you will have vaccinated Americans going to countries where the local population is not yet highly vaccinated. Now, per the CDC, although they've not yet really changed country-specific travel guidelines, the CDC says if you are vaccinated, just about any activity is safe, even without a mask. Although you should wear a mask in certain situations as dictated by local law, regulation, business policy, whatever. A third of EU residents have gotten at least one dose of a vaccine. In the US, about half of Americans have gotten at least one dose. So you will have, it's basically 6 weeks behind. Europe is 6 weeks behind the United States. Given how slowly the initial vaccine rollout was in Europe, it's actually pretty good that they're only 6 weeks behind. And there are going to be probably significant accelerations as more and more vaccines will flow in the direction of Europe. Now, I've said for a while, over time, the number of people who don't want the vaccine in the US is going to decline because there are going to be more and more things you need to be vaccinated in order to do. One of those things now that you will be able to do if vaccinated is go to Europe. I don't know that the anti-vax Republicans are that big on Europe. And what I mean by that is a lot of the same people that still don't want a vaccine, which is 41% of Republicans, a lot of them are probably the types of people who see the concept of Europe as sort of like sissy, flamboyant, and socialist. And they don't care about Europe and they're not interested in going to Europe. And in fact, being told you can only go to Europe with a vaccine, it might make them more it might reinforce their anti-vaccine beliefs. Maybe not, but we are seeing the decline in anti-vax slow down. Last month, 43% of Republicans did not want the vaccine. This month, it's 41% of Republicans. It is a decline, but it's a very, very slow decline. So great news for, who is this great news for? This is great news for would-be travelers. This is great news simply for those who want to see the world start to be able to come out of what was a very dark winter, winter of 2020. And hopefully we will continue to see those cases and deaths decline. I am cautiously optimistic that we will. And we will all be celebrating on Memorial Day weekend, not only with maybe barbecues, but also with a crazy, my accountant is saying, David, don't do it. My staff is saying, David, don't even think about it. My lawyer is saying I would reconsider, but I'm going to do it. On Memorial Day, we are offering an historic Memorial Day membership special. Be notified of it on Memorial Day by simply getting on my mailing list. You go to davidpakman.com, you type in your email address if you know what it is, and you will be notified on Memorial Day. How do you do it? Instructions forthcoming on May 31st. We'll take a quick break. Let me know your thoughts about the reopening. I'm on Twitter at dpakman, and we have a really packed show for you today. What if you could read 10 books in just one sitting? That's exactly what one of my favorite apps lets you do. It's called Blinkist, and what they do is take thousands of popular nonfiction books. They condense them down into text or audio that you can consume in 15 minutes. Blinkist makes sure that you're getting all of the important core insights from each book. So it's perfect for exploring a book you otherwise wouldn't have time for. If there's a full book you're thinking about buying, you can use Blinkist to get a sample first. Just think how much you can enrich yourself by being able to soak up an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month. And you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video. Let me very briefly remind you, lest we forget, that the David Pakman Show does depend on the support of viewers and listeners like you to continue doing what we do and to continue the expansion, which will soon include a second YouTube channel with new content, very exciting. You can sign up and participate in the support by getting a membership at joinpakman.com. The coupon code BETTER21 does save you money if so desired, but I believe the normal prices are really perfect. They're really perfect prices. Sign up at joinpakman.com. In a completely cowardly, pathetic, disgusting, but yeah, absolutely predictable move, House Republican leaders are coming out in opposition to even investigating what happened on January 6th with the Trump riots in Washington, D.C. Democrats and normal people want to investigate January 6th because it was an absolute disgrace. It was an outrageous, tragic moment in American history. And there are almost endless avenues of investigation that should be pursued. Who all participated? Who was responsible? Who instigated? What are the full explanations for delays in getting National Guard and more police to the Capitol? Who knew what and when the day of? I could go on, but there are endless avenues of questions which I would love to see answered. And yet, Republicans sent out a letter. Republican leaders sent out a letter to Republican members of Congress yesterday, trying to convince them to vote against a bipartisan proposal to launch an investigation, which in structure could be similar to the 9/11 Commission. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, a disgusting person, came out against the bipartisan deal, saying the scope of the investigation is too narrow. Now, this is really, it's not shrewd, because shrewd almost has like a positive connotation, maybe cynical. You might think, wow, Kevin McCarthy thinks the investigation is too narrow. So clearly McCarthy wants to investigate more things about January 6th. That sounds good, right? Wrong. Republicans say in their letter that to really investigate what happened on January 6th, you need to investigate things that are completely unrelated, like when Steve Scalise got shot at baseball practice in 2017. The letter that they wrote says, quote, "This commission cannot investigate the political violence leading up to and following the attack on the 6th, including the June 2017 shooting at the Republican congressional baseball practice and the deadly attack on Capitol Police on April 2, 2021. The report is due too late to properly educate and advise on securing the Capitol complex, and there is no prohibition against indefinite extensions." Not said there is that the January 6th rioters were all Trump supporters, inspired by Trump, and maybe to some degree by right-wing media. The shooting of Steve Scalise in 2017 really has nothing to do with this. Now, on the Senate side, Mitch McConnell, who is the Senate minority leader, says that Republicans are undecided on whether to go ahead with the commission, but they're open to hearing arguments. Some Republicans have already expressed support for the commission. For example, Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn said, quote, "I think we need to do something to identify the problems. I mean, shame on us if we can't address it." Now, I asked on Twitter yesterday, why would anyone be opposed to even investigating the January 6th riots? And I received some really interesting responses. Here's a representative sample. One viewer telling me, because they are scared the truth will be told about things they don't want anyone to know about. Another follower of mine on Twitter says I think they mean they are connected to those who are responsible and therefore are complicit. And a very comprehensive answer, giving 4 reasons why Republicans are opposed to the investigation. A, it will incriminate their dear leader, Donald Trump. B, it will incriminate their voters and supporters. C, it will incriminate their fellow Republican Congress members. And D, it will incriminate themselves. Let's hope that this panel is formed and that the investigation happens. Now, one last thing. In the defense of some Republicans do want to do this. And I think that's a good thing, right? Like, that's something. And of course, this should be done a little bit later in the show. I'll tell you about man of the people and government transparency advocate Tucker Carlson, who is completely against this investigation. Really transparent, right, guys? This is why populism and faux populism can be such a pernicious thing. That's a little bit later. We learned late last night about a major change to the scope of the current New York Attorney General's investigation into the Trump organization. It is now a criminal investigation, full stop. What started as a civil investigation into the Trump organization is now a criminal investigation. This is a huge deal. And it at least changes the possible path of the probe. Now, remember that New York State Attorney General Letitia James was already in the middle of a civil investigation of Donald Trump's company. Now they are investigating the Trump Organization, quote, in a criminal capacity. This is also, it's hard to even keep this all straight. This is not the same investigation that Cy Vance Jr. is doing. James's spokesman says this investigation is being conducted in conjunction with the criminal probe of Trump and the Trump Organization by the Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance. This is the Attorney General of New York now. These are two criminal investigations. Now, part of this is all thanks to Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former attorney, who has said many times now that the Trump Organization misstated real estate valuations to reduce their tax liabilities and to get better loan and insurance terms. The full statement from Letitia James's office is short, and it is, quote, "We have informed the Trump Organization that our investigation into the organization is no longer purely civil in nature. We are now actively investigating the Trump Organization in a criminal capacity, along with the Manhattan District Attorney. We have no additional comment at this time." Recall that Letitia James is the prosecutor who went after the Trump Foundation. Trump's now dissolved charity was ordered to pay $2 million to settle a lawsuit by the AG's office saying he misused the Trump Foundation and its funds to benefit his presidential campaign, as well as other unlawful activity for more than a decade. And the Trump Foundation agreed to pay the fine. And they also agreed in December of 2018 to completely dissolve and donate all remaining funds to charity. That's the same Letitia James that got that done, who is now investigating the Trump Organization criminally. Trump is calling both investigations witch hunts, which to me suggests, wow, there's probably something here. And we will see where both investigations go. Now, I maintain, and I know some people get mad when I say this, I maintain Trump will see no prison time period. There will be no handcuffed perp walk. But the more that this builds, and now it has shifted from merely civil to criminal, the possibility that someone goes to prison does go up. But almost certainly this is going to be a massive financial burden on Trump in terms of legal bills. And as I've said before, these investigations, while they're not going to put Trump in prison, they're not. They could keep Trump from running in 2024, which would be amazing. It's optimistic thinking, but it very well could quickly become a massive burden for Trump. And if it keeps him out of candidacy in 3.5 years, that would be a great thing. Now, there's one other aspect to this. There are people reacting to news from this probe and from the Cy Vance probe by saying, if it's taking this long, nothing is happening. It's just going to peter out. I spoke to a couple of prosecutors I know who said, from the outside, you can't really know. But often, the longer the investigation takes, the stronger the case is, because they're uncovering more and more wrongdoing, and they want to be really sure that the cases are ironclad before they move forward. Either way, it's speculative. But the point is, it's not obvious, it's not certain that the fact that this is dragging with no charges yet is bad. It's also important to remember, at least with the Cy Vance probe, that Trump was able to obstruct that moving forward by not providing his tax returns for his entire presidency. Only in the last couple of months did they finally get a court decision that said, yes, Trump must give Cy Vance his taxes. So that part of the investigation has only really now started. It's been delayed, and that could be part of it as well. One other really small thing. A couple of people wrote to me and they said, this is the real reason Trump left New York. It wasn't to avoid taxes. It wasn't because New York wasn't good to him because they didn't vote for him in the presidential election. The real reason Trump left New York was to get away from this investigation. I just don't think so. Number one, Trump is a narcissist, and narcissists have this idea that no one can touch them. So I don't think Trump is leaving. That doesn't make sense. Number two, leaving New York doesn't actually stop the investigations. So it would be stupid in that sense. And number three, Trump is really cheap and really greedy. So changing residency from New York to Florida makes a lot of sense because avoiding taxes is completely on brand with Donald Trump's priorities. So I believe that's really the reason Trump left. The investigation will follow him to Florida if that's what needs to happen. And it will Trump. I don't think Trump really thinks in the terms you and I might think of something like this. So I think it's just money. And that's why Trump left New York, at least as far as residency is concerned. We'll have more on this growing multiple investigations set now on the David Pakman Show Instagram. Make sure you're following us on Instagram at David Pakman Show, and follow me on Instagram for the latest from my garden. Nothing more riveting than that. You can find me on Instagram at david.pakman. The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%, BETTER21. So thanks to some recently released court documents, we've learned that multiple of the accused rioters from the January 6th insurrection attempt tried to use the legal defense, Donald Trump made me do it. Now, they tried, but at least so far it's been unsuccessful because a court said no way. And in fact, one of the people who tried this is that guy known as the QAnon shaman, Jacob Chansley, who was photographed in the House chamber wearing like a Viking hat of some kind. And his lawyer was actually making the case that what Jacob Chansley did would not have happened were it not for the words and the actions of President Donald Trump. His lawyer said, if it weren't for Trump, my client, Your Honor, would never even have been in Washington, D.C. in support of the president. And were it not for the specific words of the then president on January 6th saying, we're going to march down Pennsylvania Avenue or whatever, the defendant would not have walked down Pennsylvania Avenue and would never have gone near, never mind inside the U.S. Capitol building, saying my client did it because Donald Trump told him to. This was part of his lawyer trying to get him out on bail instead of having him stay in pretrial detention. And his lawyer argued he's not dangerous. He wasn't even sincerely there due to his own beliefs. It was just because of Trump. Trump made him do it. And the judge in the case, Royce Lamberth, said, quote, even taking defendant's claim at face value, it does not persuade the court that the defendant would not pose a danger to others if released. If the defendant truly believes that the only reason he participated in an assault on the U.S. Capitol was to comply with President Trump's orders, this shows the defendant's inability or refusal to exercise his independent judgment and conform his behavior to the law. In other words, the judge is saying, if Trump really convinced him to do it, it's still on him. And that doesn't tell me if I release him, he won't be a threat, because someone else could convince him to do something just as dangerous or stupid. Whether he believes Trump wants him to do it has nothing to do with whether his actions conform with the law. And you might remember the other version of this that we talked about, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. A defendant's lawyer in another one of these rioters' lawyers claimed that the accused was suffering from, quote, Fox-itis and, quote, Fox mania, and that it is Fox News rather than Donald Trump that are to blame. Now, big picture, this is not a valid legal excuse. Answering someone else's call to break the law doesn't make it irrelevant that you still broke the law. But there are cases when if someone was really manipulated or forced into breaking the law, I mean, in a way, I'm not comparing Trump to Charles Manson, but when you look at the Charles Manson case, Charles Manson, if I recall correctly, I mean, this is just occurring to me now. If I recall correctly, Charles Manson himself did not actually kill anyone, but he directed others to do it. And yet he was found legally guilty because he brainwashed, manipulated others, etc. There are circumstances where if you were really manipulated or forced into breaking the law, and forced into breaking the law is an even different thing, courts can consider that. And it can impact guilt versus innocence, and it can impact sentencing. But under federal statutes in this particular situation, the law wouldn't see the Trump defense as a valid defense. It wouldn't see Fox-itis and Fox mania as valid defenses. Just because a nutty, childish clown tells you to do something, even if that someone is the president, does not make it a valid legal defense, particularly when you are dealing with these specific federal statutes. But This is sort of a version of stochastic terrorism. As I've said before, it's really hard to hold people accountable for that. But if you have a large enough audience, remember Glenn Beck, when he used to have, I think it was a Fox News or CNN show, Glenn Beck ranting about the Tides Foundation, which he became obsessed with every day. Statistically, someone in his audience is going to hear that and say, I'm going to go and do something about the Tides Foundation. And case in point, there was a guy arrested by California Highway Patrol driving to the Tides Foundation to do who the hell knows what. With a large enough audience, when you start saying someone should do X, and if only someone did Y, the likelihood that at least one person, in this case hundreds or thousands of people, will try to do it goes up and up and up. It's kind of like a silly version of the Nuremberg defense. The difference being none of these people are in the chain of command. The Trump rioters were not in the chain of command where you could even say I was following orders in a sense. There were no risks or punishments if you just stayed the hell home. If the QAnon shaman said, you know what, instead of going to DC, I'll stay at home, no one was going to punish him for that. There was not going to be any risk to doing that. He would have been fine. And so that also furthers the reason why it's not a particularly good defense. Now, even if it doesn't make a difference for these specific people, the funny or maybe the ironic thing in people pointing to Trump as the reason why they did this could be something that comes up in a Justice Department investigation or a House congressional investigation into Trump's role. But I don't expect that will go very far, at least at holding Donald Trump accountable. The other possibility is that while claiming Trump made me do it might make no difference in their criminal trials, civil trials are a whole different thing. And one lawyer wrote to me and said, the Trump made me do it defense could be something that plays a role in a civil trial if there were to be one. Last thought. It is not beyond me the irony of people who claim to represent a political ideology that preaches and values and prioritizes personal responsibility, who then get charged with crimes that they did and immediately claim as their defenses, Fox News convinced me or Trump made me do it. It's pitiful. It's pitiful and pathetic. And it is again a reminder that their stated values and principles are merely stated. They are not really sincerely held values and principles. They abandon them instantly when it's no longer convenient. One of the notable people who does not want an investigation into just what on earth happened in Washington, D.C. on January 6th as Trump supporters broke into the Capitol is Fox News propagandist Tucker Carlson. It's all as much of a riot as you can imagine. We already discussed earlier in the show that many in the Republican Party, including Republican leaders like House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, they don't want the January 6th investigation to happen. And here, Tucker Carlson praises Kevin McCarthy for opposing the investigation. Recall that Tucker Carlson is very much a man of the people. He's a populist. He's for transparency. He's for accountability. He's for all of that stuff. But he doesn't even want an investigation to take place. And here he is attaboying Kevin McCarthy.
This is not a partisan show. We usually go after Democrats. Sometimes we go after Republicans. Recently, we went after a couple of times the head Republican in the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy of California, for his living arrangements. But we want to be honest above all, and when politicians do something right, we want to say so. Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, today did something right. He said he will not support a commission, a 9/11-style commission, to investigate the insurrection of January 6th.
Tucker is defiantly proud of Kevin McCarthy for opposing a commission to investigate the January 6th insurrection. It's also hilarious to hear Tucker say he doesn't do a partisan show. I mean, we could do 15 minutes on that, but we won't. Tucker is actually so opposed to an investigation that he wants to take names of all Republicans who vote in favor of it, because some do plan to. The exact number is yet unclear. Take a listen.
The top Republican on the House Homeland Security Committee is apparently pushing for this 9/11-style commission. One anonymous House Republican told The Hill that anywhere from between 30 and 50 Republicans might join CATCO in voting for this farce. What are they voting for? They're voting to give Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden more power, power they do not deserve, power they did not win in November. Republican voters deserve to know the names of every congressional Republican who votes for this farce. for the myth-making that is being used right now to strip you of your constitutional rights. They should know which of the representatives is playing along with this poisonous hoax.
So clearly Tucker painting this as some kind of partisan witch hunt, when the truth is that some Republicans are saying they support the commission because it's being done in a bipartisan way. Not only is there bipartisan support for the commission, not only are there bipartisan sponsors for the commission, the plan right now would be that the commission would have 10 members. Democrats get to appoint 5. Republicans get to appoint 5. Democrats appoint the chair and Republicans appoint the vice chair. Remember, Democrats control the House. So the closest you can get to it being perfectly bipartisan is 5 and 5. Democrats, because they control the House, pick the chair. Republicans get the vice chair. And the commission would only be able to issue subpoenas if they're signed off on by both the Democratic chair of the commission and the Republican vice chair. So, you couldn't even have a situation where Democrats alone start issuing all sorts of subpoenas. The Republican vice chair would have to be on board with every single subpoena. And yet Tucker doesn't like it, frames it as some kind of farce, because God forbid we should ever find out what really happened on that day and the causes and the explanations for why things went down the way they did. But as we said earlier, if you were complicit, you wouldn't want to support it. And defendants accused in the January 6th Trump riots have actually tried, 2 of them at least, blaming Fox News and blaming President Donald Trump. Neither has worked so far. But blaming Fox News, Tucker Carlson is a part of Fox News. And it seems pretty clear that he would be against such an investigation because it can't possibly be good for him. I'm not saying the probe would bring down Tucker. I'm not saying it would get him to lose his show or get him charged with a crime. None of that would happen. But if you're Tucker, it wouldn't be good for more attention, especially in congressional hearings, to be on the alleged role of Fox News in fomenting the riots. That's very clear. So it does make sense in that way that Tucker would be opposed to it. Now, on the other hand, the White House does back a January 6th commission. And really, one should have been formed on January 7th. Maybe May of 2021 is the best we can get. At the end of the day, if they can't get Republican leadership to support it, I think they probably will. But if they can't, just go ahead without Republican leadership. They can find Republicans who will be on the commission because there's enough Republicans already, at least 20, who want to do the investigation. Some of those Republicans will participate in good faith to try to get some answers. And the Republicans that remain on the sidelines screaming, this is a partisan witch hunt, I don't think they'll make much of a difference. Democrats should continue to focus on the 70% of the country that sees Biden doing well on COVID. And they say, yeah, Biden's doing well on COVID. They see Biden doing well on vaccination and they say, yeah, the vaccination rollout is going well. Just proceed, because I think you'll have an equivalent 70% of the country that understands the importance of doing this probe and will support doing it. If you disagree, and if you think there's political risk to going forward without Republicans in the leadership supporting it, they've got Republicans that will be on the commission. Let me know. I don't see it as a risk. I think Democrats should move forward one way or the other. Let me know your thoughts. The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them. All right, these are my favorite clips today. This is so funny. Today on the bonus show, when I'm joined by producer Pat, we will talk about how suddenly Rudy Giuliani's son, Andrew Giuliani, is running for governor of New York. And he appeared on Fox News last night and gave a completely bizarre and farcical interview. But Eric Trump didn't want Andrew Giuliani to outdo him, apparently. So I can't actually tell who gave the dumbest appearance last night on Fox News. Let's take a quick listen. We're going to start with Eric Trump, Donald Trump's son. Not the smartest one, I don't think. And Eric Trump claims that random people are coming up to him on the street, crying in tears over how much they want Donald Trump back as president. Take a look at this.
More people, I can tell you, more people have come up to me on the street in the last week and given me hugs saying, we miss him so much. I mean, literally sometimes, Sean, with tears in their eyes, we miss the man so much. No matter what you say about him, he loves this country and he's willing to fight for this country.
Does anybody believe this? Like, I do believe that tears have been shed related to Trump as president, but I don't think that they're tears of joy. Then Eric Trump claims that this White House doesn't travel and that's really bad. But listen to the complete inconsistency of what he even tries to assert here.
There's no fight coming out of the White House. There's no one there. They don't travel. They don't go down to the border. They don't go overseas. They don't. I mean, there's no charisma. There's no anything.
Did you guys catch that? He says this White House is bad because it doesn't travel, and this White House is bad because there's no one at the White House. Well, hold on a second. If they're not at the White House and they're not traveling, like, where are they? Where is Joe Biden? Is the president just missing? He can't be found anywhere. He's not doing any travel. Is he at Camp David the entire time? Just vapid, pointless talking points, not even really a criticism. So that's Eric Trump. That's already really bad. But then in comes Andrew Giuliani. He is running for governor of New York State. This is Rudy Giuliani's son. He's 35 years old. He went on TV last night and declared anything that will bring money to New York, he will do. Period, full stop, end of story. Take a listen.
Well, look, let's start off with sports gambling. I don't know how much time we have. Anything that's going to bring revenue into New York, I am pro that. A lot of people that I know go to New Jersey in order to actually go and gamble.
You really feel like the Republican Party has no farm team right now. It's QAnon type people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and others. They may be the future of the Republican Party, but it's a really scary future if that's the future. You then have your Trump brown-nosers who they're not even really young, but they might potentially aspire to higher office. People like Kevin McCarthy or Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley, these types of people. And then there's the children of well-known Republicans. Andrew Giuliani, the son of Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Ivanka Trump, the children of Donald Trump. It's not looking great for the country, and many of them may win. Like, I'm not saying this looks bad for the Republican Party in the sense that they won't ever win again. Trump won. So there's a very real risk that these clowns could win. It's just not looking good for the country. The fact that these are people who are not immediately and obviously disqualified from any role in public office or in government. Now, Andrew Giuliani seems to have sort of a savior complex. Here he was on Hannity last night saying he will save the state of New York.
You just wait. You wait until 2023, and then we're going to have a nice big party up in Albany, and we're going to save our great Empire State.
So I don't know which appearance was more harebrained, Eric Trump's or Andrew Giuliani's. Now, here's a couple of bonus Andrew Giuliani clips, by the way. Here he is yesterday getting ready to make his announcement, and he seemed confused about whether the statue he was looking at was the Statue of Liberty or some other statue. I mean, I don't know. Take a look at this.
Okay, let me know whenever you're ready. Which one is that? Is that Miss Manhattan or is that Lady Liberty? That's Lady Liberty over there. So, everybody ready?
Yeah, so that's something. And then lastly, really funny, Andrew Giuliani said at his announcement that he will use his dad, Rudy Giuliani, as an asset. I mean, you can't write this stuff. Rudy Giuliani seems to have been used as an asset by so many people and countries at this point. And Andrew Giuliani, apparently with no sense of satire or parody whatsoever, and certainly no comic timing, that's for sure, saying he will use Rudy as an asset. Take a look.
When you've got the greatest prosecutor in the history of the Southern District, and you've got the greatest mayor, not just in the history of New York, but in the history of America, you're foolish if you don't use him as an asset.
So we are in for a real party here with Andrew Giuliani running for governor. These families, the Trumps, the Giulianis, they're in a sense the gifts that keep on giving. But it is a major indictment of American society and culture that people like this can actually attain power, and then that their kids are seen as at least possibly legitimate heirs to that power. Is inheritors a word? I don't know. Certainly heirs is. Heirs to that power. It is an indictment of the United States of America, and the world sees it. They laugh. We've said it before. Truly, truly horrible stuff. This is super interesting and not altogether surprising. The Daily Beast has a fascinating piece, somewhat lengthy, not huge, but take you a few minutes to read, about how Rudy Giuliani seems to have the walls closing in around him in terms of these investigations that are going on. And Donald Trump seems to have abandoned him completely, which is absolutely on brand for Donald Trump. This is a piece in the Daily Beast, which we will link to, written by Adam Ronsley and Azawin Subsang, which writes, in the weeks since the feds raided Rudy Giuliani's apartment and office in late April, close allies have tried to ferry a slew of emergency requests to former President Donald Trump and his advisors. But according to 3 people familiar with the matter, Trump and his legal advisors and confidants have been hesitant about swooping in to help the embattled Giuliani, who for years worked as Trump's personal attorney, political advisor, and attack dog. Understand what's going on. Rudy's in trouble. The walls are closing in around Rudy. They raided his home. They raided his office. It's looking really bad for Rudy. And Rudy is sending these massive dumps, for lack of a better term, of requests to Trump and his advisors for help, for interference, for whatever, some kind of intervention. And Trump is just ignoring it. The Daily Beast piece goes on to say, Team Trump's reluctance to intervene comes at a time when federal investigators have ramped up their probe into whether Giuliani's Ukraine-related work during the Trump era amounted to an unregistered and illegal lobbying operation on behalf of foreign figures. So far, no charges have been brought. Trump's silence has led to simmering frustrations among members of Giuliani's inner orbit, who privately alleged that the ex-president's team is working to convince him to hang Giuliani out to dry in his hour of need. That's another level, and that would be absolutely compelling. We've been keeping an eye, but not talking too much about Donald Trump's blogs on his website. And so far, he has not come to the defense of Rudy Giuliani, but he's also not hung Rudy Giuliani out to dry. I think that if this escalates and it gets to the point where it's clear Rudy is going to be charged, I do think Trump will publicly abandon Rudy and say he was off script. He was doing his own thing. He was not representing me. One person close to Giuliani said last week, quote, it's a question now of whether or not Trump wants to leave Rudy to fend for himself or if they're going to take a stand against this. Right now, we don't know. Among the pleas, like what is Rudy asking for? Among the pleas have been for Trump to issue a strong verbal or written statement saying Giuliani's work during the Trump-Ukraine saga was done on behalf of Trump. There's no way in hell Trump says that, because Trump needs to leave the possibility, if Rudy gets charged, of saying the Ukraine stuff had nothing to do with me. I had a perfect phone call and that's it. Whatever Rudy was doing, I don't know about. The other asks have been that Trump sign on to a legal motion to have federal investigators throw out any seized communications that Rudy and his lawyers are arguing are covered by attorney-client privilege. And further, there have been requests that Trump and his team financially help Rudy in his legal defense. Apparently, Rudy's legal expenses are going absolutely crazy. Now, that's what the Rudy people want Trump to do. On the other hand, and this is a really great piece that looks at both sides of this in the Daily Beast, 2 people close to Trump, they write, say they have urged Trump to lay low and refrain from making too many statements one way or the other. These people have told Trump it's unclear what the feds have, and anything Trump says could backfire on him and on Giuliani. That is exactly why Trump would never come out and say, Rudy was working on behalf of me, because they don't know what they have on Rudy yet. And if it's really bad, if they have Rudy dead to rights, Trump now saying everything Rudy did, he did it for me, it implicates Donald Trump. So this shouldn't surprise anybody who understands how Donald Trump operates. Look at Trump with his voters. Trump defends them. They're beautiful people. There's my African American, and the Hispanics love me, and the suburban women. These are all great people, as long as they're useful to him. But as soon as they're not, like, for example, on January 6th, Trump turned on the TV and he saw the rioters, who are all Trumpists, and he said, these people look kind of low class. They're making me look bad. And then he abandons them. Trump grifting, what was it, 70 million from his supporters for legal battles after the November election that were never going to go anywhere. Trump scamming his supporters, saying, I will fight this and I will audit that and do a recount here. And more than half the money went just to pay off Trump's campaign debt. Why? Because at that point, the election was over. The only way that these people were useful to Trump was trying to grift some money out of them. And it's the same way with Trump's lawyers and cronies. He abandoned Michael Cohen. And when Trump has political allies, he loves them while they're allies. As soon as they say something even mildly critical, Trump abandons them. So the one thing about this that is predictable and on brand is Trump's not going to come to anyone's defense unless it's useful to him. And right now coming out and saying, Rudy did great work and it was all for me, that possibly implicates Donald Trump. They don't know how bad Rudy is in trouble at this point in time. One other interesting aspect from this Daily Beast article, which says, quote, in recent weeks, Trump himself has argued behind closed doors that he wouldn't want to say Giuliani was doing all of the Ukraine work, which included a transatlantic dirt digging expedition on the Biden family, on Trump's behalf. Trump's reasoning is based on the ex-president's insistence that he didn't always know what Giuliani was doing during the Ukraine effort or concocting with his Ukrainian pals, several of whom Trump has privately dinged as idiots. So apparently this is something Trump is saying privately. It's actually possible that that is to some degree true, but that doesn't tell us Trump didn't have a sense of what was going on. Very often, someone in a role as powerful as president of the United States would be deliberately kept out of the loop as to the specifics of what his henchmen are doing. And when you're in that position, you know you're being kept out of the loop. Like, in other words, you know it's a known unknown. You know you're not being told exactly what Rudy's up to. You know the gist of it, but you're not being told the specifics in order to keep you potentially out of trouble if something exactly like this would happen. So the last thing anyone would do in this situation is to say, I knew everything he was doing and he was doing it all for me. Now, one last thing here, okay, that this goes back to Trump's narcissism. Some people are saying, obviously, Trump isn't going to help someone who has mountains of dirt on him because Trump's worried it will come back on him. But isn't there a risk that Rudy, if Trump doesn't help him, will release all the dirt he has on Trump? Trump doesn't think this way. Trump is a narcissist. Trump cannot conceive of anybody turning on him in that way. If they did, so what? He's Donald Trump. It's not like anything bad can happen. Anything Donald Trump does in his mind is legal and good because it's something he did, and that would never happen. So I know you and I might say, you know, it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, Trump doesn't want to defend Giuliani because that could come back to bite him. On the other hand, if Trump doesn't, Rudy could release whatever dirt he has on Trump. Trump, the narcissist, doesn't think the dirt Rudy has could really damage him in a serious way. That's what you have to remember about how the narcissist thinks. So we'll see what happens. Let me know if you think there are charges forthcoming for Rudy. I think I just don't know. And it's not because I don't think Rudy did some horrible things. It's similar to Gates. We have a two-tier justice system in this country. We know that people in positions of power often are not subject to the same circumstances that other people are. So I genuinely don't know what to expect in terms of charges against Rudy, but let me know your thoughts. We have a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. Here is a delightful caller, thrilled that she got vaccinated. She's telling random strangers. Listen to the joy in her voice. I love this.
Hi, David. This is Laurel from Washington.
Yes.
And I was just watching a YouTube video about the guy who calls up and is threatening you because you gave vaccine advice. No, you didn't. Anyhow, I just called you to tell you because I want to tell everybody, total strangers on the street, I've been telling, I've got both my doses. I am so happy. So does my husband. So does my son. We're a totally vaccinated house. And we are happy.
I am with you, Laurel. I am truly with you. I wish more people would do the exact same thing because we know the path out of the pandemic. We see the data. We see what's happening in highly vaccinated countries. We see what's happening in the U.S., particularly in the most highly vaccinated states. There's no mystery here, folks. There's really no mystery. All right. So let's do it. On today's bonus show, we will talk about the political aspect of Rudy Giuliani's son running for governor of New York, particularly when Rudy himself is potentially in a very bad investigative situation with the walls closing in around him. What is that going to look like? Number two, Bank of America will raise its minimum wage to $25 per hour by 2025. Wow. Wow. Or is it? We will talk about it. And also, Texas moving very quickly. No masks are required at just about every Texas state facility anymore. Is this logical based on the numbers? Is this risky? If yes, for who? All of those questions and hopefully some answers on today's bonus show. Get instant access to the bonus show two ways. Become a member at joinpakman.com or become a patron at patreon.com/DavidPakmanShow. Both ways, you get instant access to the bonus show. It is a good one today, and I hope to see you then. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Blinkist is the app that helps you become a more well-rounded person by letting you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try it for free and get 25% off a subscription by going to Blinkist.com/David Pakman.